Sample 23 is a princess seam front bodice. You have two pattern pieces here. One is cut on the fold, which represents the center front, and then you're going to cut two of the side piece. Make sure you clip your notches at the seams and at the match points. After I separate the pattern piece from the fabric, I'm going to place a side on each side of my front. Here's my center front, and then these pieces will stitch to these seams. This is called the princess seam. It comes from the top through the bust point and extends down to the waist. This works in lieu of a dart. The contour of the seam acts as a dart, and so that you get that same effect. You see princess seams commonly on evening wear, women's dresses, and sometimes you'll see it on blouses. To stitch a princess seam is really simple. I'm going to match my side piece to my front piece at the seam and pin across. I have this notch here that's going to match. You're always going to stitch from the curved side up. I'm not going to stitch on the straighter side. And that's so that we can manipulate this curve to fit into the princess seam. I'm going to go to the machine and I'm going to stitch the whole thing down with a 1/2 inch seam allowance as my pattern indicates. So I have my two pieces together and now I'm going to stitch. Go slowly, take your time. You're going to stitch with a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Make sure you back stitch at the front and end of your seam so that it locks it in. And when I get to this curve, I am going to just manipulate it so that it lines up with the outer edge of my front piece, my center front piece. In this way, you create the contour. If you notice any types of pleating or it gets bunched up, just simply keep your needle down and raise your presser foot so you can release the fabric and you can manipulate again. You're going to go all the way down to the bottom and again lock at the end. When I do the other side, I'm going to be stitching in the other direction, but I'm still going to keep my curved piece on the top. I'm just simply going to start from the bottom, and then you can pin it in place if that makes it easier for you. So again, you're going to use your 1/2 inch seam. You're going to line them up at the bottom, lock stitch, and stitch up to the top. Once I've stitched my seams on both pieces, I'm going to come over to my iron and I'm going to press my seams toward the center on both sides. Because we have this curved seam, it will not lie flat, so we need to clip it. You're just going to go along the curve only through the 2 layers of seam allowance, and you're just going to clip maybe about every inch. Once you do that, you'll notice that the seam now will lie flat, it won't pucker. If I turn it over and I put it flat, you'll notice that it doesn't lay flat. And that's because you have this curved seam that's meant to fall over the bust line and contour, so it's never going to lie flat. The princess seam is always clean finished with a lining or another layer. If you use corsets, you'll notice that they have multiple layers. So I'm not going to have you overlock anything on the outer edge. I'm going to have you pass it in just like that. Just make sure you press it.